Greetings, I'm Travis. Welcome to Myers Megafictional Musings. Appreciate you watching this video. I hope I can sustain your attention for roughly 15 minutes or so to talk about Wittgenstein's Mistress, a novel that I finished last week. Finished it in 3 days actually, and found it utterly captivating and masterful, and I just felt compelled to share something, as I often do with the big books I love, although this isn't a big book. But it was probably more than I had even anticipated. Now, the video will probably just be me musing recklessly, I guess, if that's all right. And I'm always conscious of spoilers, but I don't know that I believe in that sort of thing. So if you're really, worried about spoilers, just heed warning, I guess. Anyway, I've got some notes here, and I'm currently a little bit not, uncertain as to if I better share, what I feel through just typing stuff out and words, or if I'm better at just kind of going off the cuff and speaking. I suppose this will be a combination of both of those. I do have some notes here, so thinking about this book. I mentioned in my Instagram story last week when I started, in thinking about how I would characterize the novel so far, I use the phrase a lulling lexicon of logic. So our nameless narrator thinks out loud to the reader. She second guesses, she clarifies, paraphrases, reiterates, contradicts, and proclaims what's referred to on the back of the book as her intellectual baggage that's been accumulated throughout her life, her mysterious past. So there are dozens and dozens of references she brings up and reflections on a myriad of topics. So among others, Greek mythology, classic art, famous artists, classical music, any number of things. And on the surface, for me even, thinking about it now, I don't know that they would necessarily seem all that appealing or interesting to me, but the fact of the matter is, when I read this book, it held my attention and then some, actually. So, yeah, early on I remember thinking that the narration was quite oddly hypnotizing and like down to earth and uniquely self-aware. And it would come at me in sort of these waves of intrigue, I guess. And I just want to share a little comparison that I made in my brain about that sort of thing. I remember spending time with my grandma when I was, 10 or 12 years old. And we would just be sitting on the couch and watching TV or whatever, and she would love to talk. And I just found her, more so later in life, but just remember that whole thing, her speaking just being very lulling and hypnotizing, if that makes any kind of sense. And I was like oddly comforted and riveted by what she was saying. So I feel like Wittgenstein's Mistress is almost the literary equivalent of that sort of feeling, if that makes any kind of sense. But that's kind of how I thought of it as well. And let me see here. It's also important, I think, you guys, to note the unique singular structure and format of this book, right? Which is essentially a sentence by sentence, thought by thought format. There'll be a few sentences, never more than 4 or 5 lines, and then an indentation and a new sentence. And this carries on for the length of the entirety of the novel, and there's no space breaks or chapter breaks throughout. And, when I first saw it visually, I was like, whoa, flipping through it, and wasn't sure, but then for me personally, it read fabulously. So I'm trying to be aware of spoilers. Most of the book is comprised of these musings, if you will, or thoughtful reflections that I referred to. Markson will always, however, bring it back to the present narrative, story arc about this woman, a nameless narrator who apparently is the last human being left on Earth, and this is her day-to-day existence on this beach in this house. Okay. Now the narrative, again, for example, she might be unloading through the reader about how much She's struggling to remember if it was Gustave Flaubert or Guy de Maupassant who liked to take their lunch under the Eiffel Tower when they were working. Or, yeah, so it can just be any of these things, right, that she keeps talking about. And then she'll hit you with the next sentence in the present, and it'll say, quote, "I've just wrapped my head in a towel, having gone out for some greens and a wet salad." So this is her existence day to day now as the last person on earth, trying to get by, what have you. Now, I also think I mentioned that hers is a deeply conscious narrative, a self-aware type of narration, which, when I reflect, is not necessarily for every reader, I want to say. And what I mean by that is, I feel like, yeah, I'm a bit of a nerd, but I wonder if you almost have to be kind of nerdy to love this book, I guess, like I did. I'm not even sure what I mean by that necessarily, but I just don't think it's for everyone. However, she could be rambling about anything, like whether or not it was Brahms or Shostakovich who walked around and carried candy in their pockets to give to kids in the community or something like that. I mean, it's pretty wide-ranging topic or content here. So, yeah, I mean, I may have mentioned also I found this book to be fairly riveting, quite exciting. Like, even though nothing fundamentally exciting, I guess, or profound really occurs. But it's almost as if the anticipation I had centered on the fact that somehow it's like I knew I was always going to be satisfied with whatever ending Markson decided to come up with. I mean, however he wanted to render that final scene of this novel, I was not going to be let down. This is very similar to another recent book I read, America and the Cult of the Cactus Boots, A Diagnostic, by Philip Friedenberg. So I read that book, just joyful experience throughout, and then, you have this sense that whatever happens, happens in the end, and you're not going to be let down, as I said. So, yeah. As I dug into my own thoughts of this novel, and that's what this book is about, is thought, right? And our sequences of our thoughts, and what are the progressions and digressions of our mind and our thoughts. I realized, and before I decided to read this book, I picked up some nonfiction content from my library on Wittgenstein himself, and I got a little bit more informed as to his philosophies and outlook on life and what have you. So that definitely helped, I think, my experience of reading this. But so again, I realized that my overwhelming positive reaction to this novel can certainly be attributed to David Markson's ability, in my humble opinion, to provide a not inconsiderable amount of heart and sincerity to the story. Really covertly, I must say. And well, for instance, this narrator really values her sunsets, and she would name her sunsets after famous artists. Like, tonight was a Van Gogh, description of colors then. But so that was kind of neat. And I mean, and I don't want to say too much about that because I'm curious as to what other readers might think about that. I mean, just the element of sincerity in this book, I'm curious as to what others think. So, for instance, she also will remember fondly something that her mother had said to her in her final moments before she passed away that really stuck with her or whatever. So, and that's all I want to say about that, the sincerity part, as I said, but for fear of spoiling the character. But I for one, laughed out loud many times in this book. She's really clever. She's funny. And as I said, I was also very moved more than once, additionally. An example of maybe just a touch of the humor in this book. She injured her ankle at some point, and she found a wheelchair to use around her house. And it's quite funny how she refers to it as she's surprised at herself at how she's able to rip around her house, quite adept in this wheelchair. And then, again, Markson brings it back to the present and her plight. We feel for her and what she's going to do next to survive or whatever. So I remember also noting a degree of really what I would call sad irony then in this story, because here we have this woman, who would seem to be, by all accounts, a wonderful companion, conversationalist, very funny, down-to-earth, sincere person. And she has no one to do that with, to share that with, to converse with, right? So that part was pretty sad, right? It's hard-hitting, and again, I'll leave it at that for fear of spoilers. Towards the end of the book, another sentence struck me with considerable cognitive force. But first, a little bit of context. So as a teacher, I have been teaching for 15 years. I've slowly seen the effects of technology and this constantly updating and ever-evolving digital world we live in. So I teach 12 to 15-year-olds, and there is an alarming sort of apathy that I notice, and I get both inspired by and sad by. Some students are truly on a weird sort of autopilot, and I find that day to day I will often have to repeat myself, because I can feel and I can sense and I can see that they aren't with me. They are not fully engaged and listening to what I'm saying, their teacher, right? And it's not a behavior thing or a disrespect thing. What I think it is a digital device thing, being honest, right? These kids are distracted and they're disinterested and they're diverted by these temptations of their phones, their devices, and it's a whole other can of worms, and I'll stop right here, but I think it's a very far-reaching and complicated problem. So what I'm trying to communicate with that sort of thing, I think, has roots with what David Foster Wallace masterfully depicts in Infinite Jest, right? I mean, and Infinite Jest was published 8 years after Wittgenstein's Mistress. So, but anyway, here's the quote I'm referring to, going back to all this, and so bear with me. Obviously, this is a thought that's going along with a thought that she has, but here's the quote. It says, which is to say that even when one's telephone still does function, one can be as alone as when it does not. So again, that sentence really hit me hard. I mean, and that's fully understanding the fact that I grasped that maybe it could just be another sentence for someone else, but for me, that certainly caused a lengthy reflection. A big part of this book's initial allure for me was the fact, naturally, that David Foster Wallace provides the afterword in this edition. And he also called this book the high point of experimental fiction, something to that extent. And this book's been on my radar for a long time. So again, I knew that I wanted to do some kind of review on this book, and I kind of held off on the afterword so I could do all this first, and I'm still yet to read it, actually, so it's kind of a delayed gratification sort of thing. And I guess what I mean by that is, just knowing how much he shared a love for this book, just like I did, certainly, and knowing that I get to look forward to shortly when I read it, his thoughts on it, and I can't wait to get his insights and understand his take on it as well, being such a beautiful creative mind that was gone far too soon from us all, right? Anyway, I can't say enough good things about Wittgenstein's Mistress. I stuck it back up on my shelf there, so I'm too lazy to go get it and show you, but read it, people, and bump it right up on your TBR. It's quite short, it's quite readable, if you're a nerd like I am, as I said. I hope you took something from this video. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.